All right. Hello, Professor Christensen. This is my Unit 2 paper slash, I guess, presentation, more so than anything else. In this presentation, I'm going to be examining the themes of forgiveness within Shakespeare's The Tempest, specifically in regards to this question, which I believe goes unanswered within the text. It's, has Prospero truly forgiven the people who betrayed him? And I believe that the answer to this question is no. Within the confines of the play itself, Prospero has not truly forgiven the people who betrayed him because Prospero's story is not a story about forgiveness. Rather, The Tempest is a story about the cathartic act of learning to let go of past wrongs that you can't control. And I think this is made evident throughout Prospero's whole journey throughout the play, but specifically in the moment in which Ariel talks to Prospero about the ways that he's essentially torturing the men who betrayed Prospero. And Ariel tells Prospero that his affections, were he human, would become tender towards them. And Prospero says that his will as well. And this, I think, is the culminating moment of the play. It's the moment where we see that Prospero is learning to let go of things. It's not a moment of forgiveness, but it is a recognition that it's time to let go. To truly understand this moment, I think we need to have a greater understanding of the Prospero's journey throughout the play as a whole. So we'll have to understand Prospero's anger, what's made him so angry, how he's responded to that anger through his attempts to control everything. Then that defining moment, the moment where Prospero decides to let go, and then the key resolution moments that show the reiterations of Prospero's decision to let go and to finally move on. And then we'll end with a conclusion. So Prospero is an angry man. This is something that we come to understand right off the bat. Our first introduction to Prospero is the storm that he's brewing, is the Tempest. That's the namesake of this play. Prospero brews this tempest and attempts to bring these men who wronged him to the island so that he can start to control their fates. But the moment that we truly get introduced to Prospero truly as a character is his first interchange with Miranda, his daughter. So Prospero's first lines with Miranda are the first time that he actually ever tells her the story of who they are and how they came to be on this island. And this is a really interesting scene because as Prospero relates this story to her for the first time in her life, probably because he's been protecting her from this intense anger that he feels, Prospero actually constantly checks in with Miranda to see if she's paying attention to this big story that he's telling. He says things like, "Dost thou attend? I pray thee mark me. Dost thou hear?" Just constantly checking in to see if she's really understanding. And the first time I read this, I thought it was kind of funny. I thought maybe Miranda, I don't know, was falling asleep or something. But upon further reflection, Prospero is telling the story and he's checking in with Miranda to see if she's paying attention. But every single time he asks this, we know that Miranda is paying stark attention because she responds, "Yes, Dad, your tale would cure deafness. Yeah, I'm 100% paying attention." So we can tell that Miranda, the issue is not in her drifting off or falling asleep. These questions, these demands for attention are less of a reflection in Miranda's attention span, but more of a reflection on Prospero's emotional state. He is so angry and so in disbelief over the things that have transpired in his own life that as he relates them, he just is trying to really communicate this point across of how angry he really is. Do you understand the magnitude of what's happened? Do you understand how angry you should be? Do you get it? So Prospero's anger is translated in that way. And Prospero's anger over this situation that they have found themselves in actually causes him to become a little bit of a control freak. So Prospero and Miranda, in the moment that Prospero lost his dukedom and was sent with Miranda on this boat, he lost control of everything. He lost control of his dukedom. He wasn't able to dictate his fate. It was on the whims of mercy that they came to the island at all. So this utter lack of control fueled this anger that Prospero now has to make him want to control everything. There's actually a quote that I love from the new Frozen movie. So I'm sorry for referencing Frozen 2 in a Shakespeare presentation, but I think this quote is really good and really prevalent to Prospero's own situation. He says, the character Olaf within Frozen 2 says, "We call this controlling what we can when things feel out of control." So when Prospero lost control of what he had control of, his response was to just start controlling everything. In more poetic words, Papira Lahiri talks about this in an article that she wrote. She says, Prospero, or his bereavement over his worldly kingdom, and mixed emotions pertaining to helplessness, hatred, and revenge towards those who made him suffer, make him drive all his energies towards establishing his ultimate right and hold over the island. So Prospero's anger has fueled this rage that makes him control everything. And this we especially see as he exercises control over Caliban, over Ariel, over the fate of his own daughter, Miranda, but especially in the way that he handles Antonio and Sebastian and King Alonso as he brings them to the island and he puts them through several torturous moments. Now, these moments in which he controls these men's fate specifically are really interesting because stage directions during these moments usually dictate that Prospero in these scenes enters from above, and he enters in a way that makes him invisible to those men who are below him. So this puts Prospero in a very godlike position of power over these men, especially since he's the one controlling them and manipulating them. So we see that Prospero has this intense urge to control because of the anger that he feels at the hands of these men's betrayal. So the whole play, we see Prospero exercising his revenge, exercising his anger, and it all leads up to this moment between Ariel and Prospero. So Ariel so far has been the liaison between Prospero and these men. He's kind of been the one inflicting these punishments upon them specifically. And Ariel comes to Prospero after one of the final moments, in which Prospero has kind of just put a cherry on top of the torture that he's inflicted these men to. And Ariel gives a status report on these men about the emotional labors that they're facing. And he tells Prospero, hey, like, things are bad. He says, if you now beheld them, your affections would become tender. And Prospero responds and says, dost thou think so, spirit? And Ariel says something really interesting. He says, mine would, sir, were I human. And Prospero, there's a pause, and then he responds and he says, and mine shall. And I love this reference to Ariel saying, were I human? Because Ariel, of course, is not human, but Prospero as well has been exercising power in a very non-human way, in a way that allows him to control and affect the fates of the people around him. So when Prospero pauses and reflects on everything he's done, on the control that he's exercised, and whether or not it's made him feel fulfilled, he recognizes that no, he is not better off now as he's tried to control these men. So he takes a step back and he says, and mine shall. And that's more of a recognition of his affections becoming tender. It's him saying, I'm going to become human again. I'm going to let go of this intense control that I've held over these people. And I've realized now that I need to move on. There's actually a really interesting quote in this play that I think ties into that really well. And what's interesting about this is that this is said by Antonio, who is the brother who deposed of Prospero in the first place. Antonio says, what's past is prologue, what to come, and yours and my discharge. So in the very moment where Prospero realizes that he can't control anymore because it's not bringing him the satisfaction that he thought it would, he comes to realize that's what's past is prologue. What's past cannot be changed anymore. That's the story that has already happened. What you do have control over, the only thing that you have any real, true, actually impactful control over is your own future. So this recognition makes Prospero decide that it's time to relinquish that control and it's time to really let go. So this does not mean that Prospero is in a place where he's ready to forgive these men of what they've done to him. He's still angry, But he does realize that he has to let go of what has happened. He has to let go of his attempts to control and manipulate, because it's doing nothing for him. It's not making him who he thought he would be. Sarah Vandenberg has an academic article about this. And she says this as well. She says, Prospero in particular must distance himself from himself, observing himself as well as others before he can extend his hand in forgiveness and love. So before Prospero can take those big steps of reconciliation, he has to take a step back, realize what he's become and whether or not his accomplishments have made him feel more purpose in his life. And then upon the realization that he can't change the past, that the actions he's taking now won't change what's happened to him and his daughter, he has to let go so that he's able to move on. So after this defining moment in which Prospero, after his conversation with Ariel, decides to become human again and to let go, we get a scene in which Prospero finally sees again, after all these years, the king and Antonio and Sebastian. And this scene is really, again, really interesting because it's a very one-sided scene. Prospero goes up to this scene and he verbally forgives each and every one of these men. But it's a very stilted and awkward and one-sided conversation, especially for Antonio and Sebastian. Prospero doesn't give them much time to speak, but he verbally says, I forgive you. And it's a very frank, matter-of-fact forgiveness because it's not actually a forgiveness, it's a dismissal. He's saying, look, we have to move on. If we want to find happiness and peace, we're just going to let go of what has happened in our past and we're going to move on. So he's not intent at all on the emotional and drawn out reconciliation, but he does make more of a declaration. Hey, this is how things are going to be now, because if I continue the way I was continuing down the path of a revenge tragedy, then I'm going to end up destroying both my own life and the life of one of the only people that I truly love. So it's not a joyful reunion, but it is a recognition that it's time to let go so that they can move on. This is further highlighted when Prospero makes this statement. He tells Ariel, I'll drown my book. And this is a great symbolic moment because the book, Prospero's book, is what has been giving him the ability to exercise magical control over the elements, over people, over everything. So as Prospero lets go of his book, it's a great callback to him letting go of past wrongs so that he's able to move on. And the final point that really drives all of this home is actually Prospero's final monologue that he delivers to us in the audience. Prospero says, in his final moments on stage, let me not, since I have my dukedom got, and pardon the deceiver, dwell in this bare island by your spell. So this is Prospero's final plea. He's asking us to let him go. In the same way that he has let go of everything, he wants us to let him go too. Specifically from the island, which has been symbolic of these 12 years of hurt and anguish and hatred. He wants to leave that, to leave it behind, to truly let it go. And I love this line especially right here, and pardon the deceiver, because I think it speaks to the point that Prospero has not forgiven. He has let go, but he has not forgiven, because the choice of words here is, and pardon the deceiver. To pardon and to forgive are two very different things. To pardon means simply to get rid of the intended punishment, while forgiveness, on the other hand, is more of an emotional reconciliation. So by pardoning the deceiver, Prospero is recognizing that he's not ready to emotionally forgive these people, but he is ready to pardon. He is ready to let go so that he can move on. This is further recognized when he says, my ending is despair, unless I be relieved by prayer, which pierces so that it assaults mercy itself and frees all faults. So these sentences are more of a religious callback to Prospero's inability to completely forgive, but they do kind of imply a hope to forgive in the future. So he's recognizing that there's still work to be done, but for now, it's enough that he's just simply letting go and relinquishing control. And then Prospero's final sentences in this play, and the final sentences of the play itself, I think are probably some of the most beautiful lines in the whole play. He says, As you from crimes would pardoned be, let your indulgence set me free. So this right here is Prospero's final recognition. These lines show a longing for freedom, and not just physically from the island, but spiritually and emotionally as well. Prospero here is appealing to the audience. He's saying, listen, I know I've made mistakes, but you have to allow me to move on, because moving on and letting go, it's the first step that we take towards freedom. And forgiveness may come later, but for right now, it is enough to just simply grant freedom and grant the future potential for joy and peace through the art of just letting go of past wrongs. So overall, I believe these points and these moments in the play, especially the moment in which Prospero talks to Ariel and decides that he too will become human and let go of those past wrongs, implicate that this play is not a play about forgiveness. This is not a play about reconciliation, but it is a play about the act and the art of letting go. It's a play that teaches us that in order to find joy and in order to take the only type of control that matters over our futures, we have to learn to let go of past wrongs so that we can move on without bringing harm to ourselves and to others. Thank you. And these are my works cited. They're very good articles. I highly recommend them.